Hey there, beautiful souls. Welcome back to another enlightening episode of the True Self Talk podcast. I am your host, Dr. Star. I'm excited to have you join me today as we continue on this journey of self-discovery and healing. But wait, today's episode is going to be extra special because we have a remarkable guest joining us. I want to introduce you to someone whose journey in the world of healthcare is nothing short of inspiring. Please give a warm welcome to Chyenne Giarnese. Chyenne's story is one of resilience, passion, and dedication. It all began when she started her journey with an associate's degree in nursing from Northwestern Community College back in 2015. And from there, she continued her journey working as a registered nurse while pursuing her dream of becoming a family nurse practitioner. Through hard work and dedication, Chyenne earned her master's in nursing science from Simmons College in 2019. But her quest for knowledge didn't stop there. While furthering her education at the University of St. Joseph's, Chyenne focused on identifying knowledge gaps in diagnosing women with ADHD and autism, showcasing her dedication to addressing important issues in healthcare. Chyenne's professional journey has been diverse and dynamic, starting in mental health and addiction medicine before transitioning into acute urgent care facilities. And after 3 years of establishing her own functional medical practice, she has delved into the realm of vibrational and energy therapies for healing, guided by her own personal health struggles. Chyenne's personal philosophy aligns with the integration of Western and Eastern medicine, always seeking to address the root cause of health issues while utilizing the most effective tools for healing. Chyenne, is an absolute honor to have you with us today, and I know that your insights and experiences will enrich our conversation in so many ways. Now, folks, in today's episode, we'll be exploring Chyenne's personal experiences through her personal and professional spaces, how these intersect with her autism diagnosis, the visibility management, and her use of IFS. Chyenne will be sharing her unique perspectives as a person with autism and how learning about IFS has impacted her journey. Please join me in welcoming Chyenne Giarnese. All right, so today in this episode, I have this lovely guest, not a guest so much, and she's more of a collaborator because this is not going to be the only episode that you'll be seeing this lovely, amazing, and I've known Chyenne for so many years now, and it is so great to have you here today.
Thanks. I'm excited to kind of talk about this topic as I face, not personally, but like a lot of stereotypes linger around women on the spectrum. And I've faced difficulties with my diagnosis and throughout work. So I'm excited to try to hopefully help other people by explaining some of my experiences in the past and with my research that I've done, throughout my doctorate studies.
Yeah. And I'm so sorry, but I forgot to introduce our friend here. He is the lovely
Mr. Dax. This is actually my service dog. I got him from Washington, all the way in the corner. He's specifically trained for me to do specific tasks, which is pretty cool. He's hyperallergenic, and he did come with me into the office, especially in the urgent care. So
love it. Love it. So, we'll be having this conversation that hopefully, will give all of you and not only the experience coming from Chyenne's personal and professional experiences, but we'll address a lot of myths and misconceptions around this diagnosis, which, as I already introduced it, autism and the intersections of the different identities and parts that come along with that diagnosis. So let's go right in and let's have this amazing conversation. So Chyenne, I'm very curious about how you first, let's just hear a little bit about your experience, getting the diagnosis of autism. How was that for you? Did you grew up knowing that you had autism, what was that like for you, even getting diagnosed?
For sure. So a lot of times, boys on average are diagnosed around age 3, and women are actually diagnosed around the age of 21. So I was fairly around the same time, about in my early 20s, and I was doing a couple stints in and out of some, mental, stays, mental hospitals, working on just trying to figure out what was going on, because I was for me, I definitely met like diagnostic criteria, but my stims were different, right? My behaviors weren't the same as like train tables and just playing with trains and cars and things like that. They looked a little bit different. A lot of my interests were always, maybe not dolls, but like really fell into almost being like my career in my professional life, or where I find my strong interests, as well as like hair twirling and just kind of also not being able to sit still, rocking back and forth, being some of mine. But remember, I wasn't diagnosed into my 20s. And when it comes to autism, it's really a set of learned social behaviors that we kind of have to adjust too. So a lot of times, one of the biggest things that I face is people saying, you don't look autistic. It's a very common thing.
Right.
And I've heard other people talk about this too. But again, just really reminding people, it's not necessary. It's in my brain. And a lot of women, and this is what kind of contributes to the late diagnosis, are very good at playing a part, masking, blending in. These are things that we, from an early age, women are more inept to do. They're going to try. While men are going to look for names or like sounds, women are very much drawn to faces. And again, that translates into, this is Bonnie, that translates into being able to make and initiate friendships, but not really keep them.
You're mentioning the masking piece. So I'm wondering, like if since you were in early childhood, being a kid, like what was that like for you? And did you have to mask yourself, around friends and family members and in different settings?
For sure. And now this, let alone, is not something that I didn't really come to really to know until after, when I was actually studying it more intensively. So I would say I was involved in musical theater, which made it a lot easier, because I felt the more silly I was, or like I would always just mimic people around me, which can obviously be a no-no, because some people might take it the wrong way. But things like echophilia and just almost mimicking the sound you have, which I didn't even realize was my own kind of body trying to kind of help me blend in and survive. So a lot of times after my diagnosis, I spent a lot of time trying to like separate what is me and what is almost parts of people that I maybe admired. And there's nothing wrong about that, but I wanted to try to find out who I was as a person, not a character, not a role. And I think that's really relating back to finding out who that self version of me was.
I love that. And I love that piece of finding, your core, yourself, your center, like who you truly are as a person, right?
Yeah. And I think almost when I was a kid, self energy was so much easier, because it was like, I didn't almost know, I wasn't aware that people were making fun of me or keeping me kind of on the outskirts of the group. But as I got older, I almost couldn't, it was like blatantly obvious once you learn it, because it's about these patterns of behavior. And once you learn, you cannot unsee the snickering or like the mimicking and stuff. And even if it is a social mishaps, but these days I've had a good trainer. My mom has kept me. She taught me a lot of like those social cues, like I said. And I think that's where I see the biggest difference between myself being, or even other women who are diagnosed later. They have developed coping skills, coping masking parts that keep them safe. Yeah. And a lot of times those can become hurtful. In my case, where I struggled, and a lot of women struggle with food and controlling food, which was something that I always looked to kind of like manage my anxiety. And even though I see that now as like something that was protecting me, it was something that was a part of me that wasn't really great for what we were working with.
Yeah. No, it's fascinating to hear, that piece of your initial process of, accepting and connecting with yourself. And I heard, this IFS language. So I'm very curious about, how IFS, not only as a modality, but also as a personal practice, has helped you.
Honestly, it's been remarkable, and I feel really blessed to have been a part of your journey with being involved in it, because at first it didn't really stick, but then it just almost like hit me overnight. I was like, wait a minute, a part of me is anxious, but why? And then it was the whole idea, like I said, unblending these parts that were trying to protect me. It just all kind of made sense, and it just clicked. So I think it was instrumental in having the tools to break out of old habits that were keeping me safe prior to getting diagnosed. So, I mean, it was huge. And I think now it falls into my self daily practice. Like when I feel an emotion come up, like more recently, I was getting a job with this is a great example of like professional experience. And I made it through 2 interviews, and I pretty much already had the job. I was just meeting with the last person that I was going to be working with. And she had an off comment when she found out that I was on the spectrum. And a lot of people will say, oh, you're on the spectrum. And I try to tell, like, because I'm always trying to educate. So I'm like, well, yes, it's considered autism level 1 because I used to be classified as Asperger's. But unfortunately, they got rid of that diagnosis when he was kind of associated with like, some crimes against humanity, etc. Even though he was one of the first people to kind of identify it. So now it's autism level 1, 2, and 3. And those numbers are based on the, I'm sure amount of kind of help that you need. And now that help can be in different areas. I'm very good when it comes to my job and caring for people and managing it, but my skills fall when it comes to like time management, and little things like that. So you can see it can be very capable in some ways and then very much need help in others.
Yeah. Now, my curiosity is speaking around the different ways that you have kind of like seen yourself now being in the healthcare professional field, and just that recent experience that you had, like going through multiple interviews where people expect you to think and act as a neurotypical person, and when you disclose your diagnoses and you disclose this neurodivergency, how do you navigate that? Yeah,
it's tough. It is definitely tough. I mean, again, it's kind of stuck in the middle. Some people will not choose to identify themselves, but unfortunately, if you don't come forth during the hiring process and say that you do have a disability, say I wanted to bring my dog and just have them just in case, I'm not going to be offered that leeway. And I definitely feel like, especially in professions where you're helping other people, there seems to be a line that people draw. Like you can't be autistic or on the spectrum and be a professional and take care of people. And that's actually where my skill set is the best. I actually lack more in doing the organizing and the scheduling and stuff. But when it comes to diagnosing, my brain just sees that puzzle. It comes from old misconceptions and just really needing to update belief systems. You can be one thing, a part of you can be one thing, and a part of you may not be that other good thing.
Yeah. And as we always say, all parts are welcome. All of your parts are welcome. And it's about relationships, like how your relationship is with all of these different parts of you, right?
Absolutely.
I forgot to ask you something when we were talking about self-energy. You mentioned self-energy, so I'm curious about how do you see that, and what's your idea of self-energy?
For sure. Self-energy for me it's a hard concept, right? Because again, unblending because I felt most of myself was built off of things that I wanted to be like, whether it was a celebrity or maybe I always loved Albert Einstein. I wanted to be as smart as him and maybe have the same hair. So I chose and picked and choose. And I had to kind of, I think the word would be like unblend what were maybe protecting parts for me, what was more masking, because unfortunately, masking or pretending all the time leads to this disgenuine self. And that's kind of what I learned, that self is when you're being authentic. And that's when you're actually letting off the highest vibration. And they could actually record that, but that's when you're being the highest vibration of yourself, is when you're being authentic to you. And that means a lot of different things, but I think that lends to the diversity of the term. It's like, when do you feel you're being true to yourself? Yeah. And that's where I think IFS really helped me, because it gave me the tools to figure out what that meant to me.
Wow. That's very impressive. I mean, like, I don't hear that often, even in clinical practice. And I know that you've been so fully immersed into the IFS world, and it has helped you so much, because it's kind of like a new way of seeing your internal experiences, and like
it gives me goosebumps, really. I mean, to just be able to understand yourself, and that's why I think it's so important, why I wanted to come up and talk about it, because currently ABA, which is basically learning social cues, is like your standard, and usually sometimes a DBT, or learning kind of, but basically set on like learning skills, not necessarily understanding yourself. And I think one of the key things to being authentic and finding out who you are is by finding out who you are yourself. And you do that by being able to talk in the inside, and, you know, just having a space where I felt like it wasn't weird. It very much aligned with me, very visual. So it came like second nature. And I hope that other people can maybe, you know, figure out, or maybe be interested in learning more about their true self through these tactics and therapies.
Right. Well, and that's one of the things that we aspired and to accomplish in life. You know, how can we all be our true authentic selves in all different areas that we are in, or, you know, spaces that we are in. So whether that is, you know, in the workspace, personal, or family spaces.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think now and you're never going to always, you know, most of the time I feel like true self, but that doesn't mean like the anxiety isn't going to creep up. And I think, you know, being able to then say, well, why am I anxious? I'm anxious because I've had some bad experiences in the past, but it doesn't mean I'm going to let it define what I'm going to try. Because if I did, I would stay in one spot. And now I know something important to me is I've seen that happen to a lot of people. Despite people doing the things, eating the good diet, they still can't get through that mental block. And I feel that's when talking about kind of the endocannabinoid system, which is something that I do and teach a lot about, is so important.
Yeah. So in closing, I really, you know, would like to hear from you. Like, what is it that you wish, if anything, for people to not only understand, you know, like autism as a diagnosis, but if anybody out there has a person or a family member who also carries that same diagnosis, what would you like to say to them and to their families?
I think it's something like, you're not alone, and just always remember to come from a place of curiosity, right? I mean, you know, kindness, curiosity, which is why I think those values that you teach in IFS are so important, because I think those are the things not only for a specific mental health group or even a disability group, but for everybody. That's how you can really feel inclusive, and that's how you can feel centered, and just, you know, and obviously you're going to mess up, you know, but coming from those principles and those key concepts, you're never going to go wrong.
Yeah, that's great. Chyenne, can you tell our audience like a little bit about your practice and where you're located and where you practicing out of?
Yes. Yeah. So I am actually working out of Whole Health Wellness Center out of Farmington, Connecticut. We are taking new patients. I do some integrative primary care as well as hormonal bioidentical hormone replacement, as well as educating people on the endocannabinoid system and everything like that. So you can head over to the website, wholehealthllc.com, and you can always call the office and schedule an appointment.
Great. So, as I already said, it is not only a pleasure to have you here. This is your podcast too. So, you all listeners and the audience who's watching our video will be hearing more from Chyenne, and I am so proud of her. She's doing amazing things. She's such a hard worker, and just people like you make me feel more connected, because when we have conversations, like, our conversations are not superficial, they go deep, and we love being in that space, and I feel like we connect better in that space as humans. Yeah,
I agree 100%, because you got to get to know someone's soul. I mean, really, that's how you're going to be able to connect to people. And I think that's so important. And yes, that can happen when you're older, but it can happen at any time if you know where to look, you know how to look. And I think that's what's great. And I really appreciate this. I'm excited to be able to help more people, maybe give them some wellness tips to help you in your journey, wherever you are. And if not, knowledge is power. So we want to teach people just how to advocate for themselves better in this kind of complex, dynamic healthcare system and world that we live in.
yeah. Well, thank you all so much for watching and listening to this episode. And again, we'll
see you around.
We'll see you around, and we'll be back doing this pretty soon, hopefully once a month. But we'll keep you posted, and stay tuned.